Good morning. Glad that you're here with us this morning. To our fathers, happy Father's Day. It is a interesting time we find ourselves as dads, and if there's probably a time for dads to be challenged to be dads as we raise our children, I'm convinced that we have to prepare our children to be warriors of faith in ways that we can hardly comprehend, as they will face a future when they are grandparents. Lord willing, it lasts that long. That will be tremendously different than the one that we have experienced ourselves. This morning, I'll be in Luke chapter 15. I do have the verses that we'll look at this morning. It's not an uncommon text probably for this setting with the prodigal son, but several weeks ago we looked at the first story, and I asked you to remember what it was like to be that lost sheep. And it's not just the rejoicing in heaven and the rejoicing of a shepherd who pursues his lost sheep, but it's the deep breath you're able to take because you know you're safe. Because you know you're in the arms of Jesus. Now the second story we haven't dealt with, that I'll just mention here, is very similar to the first story. And the second story is that of the lost coin. The widow loses one of her silver coins. And you're familiar with that story. She sweeps her house, she cleans her house, she's looking for that coin. She finds it, and there's great rejoicing, and she's excited and invites her friends to rejoice with her. And the idea is the same. Something that was lost is now found. And then we get to the last story, the prodigal son. And this story has a lot packed into it. And so I want to break that down here in just a minute. But for our fathers, I think, there was a young father who was at the nursery at the hospital. And he's staring very intently through the little window. And he's just focused. And the young mother needed to get out of bed and get up. And so she comes down the hall and she captures this scene of her husband, this new father gazing through the window. And she's so touched. She puts it in her memory as a treasure. So she eases up behind him and she puts her arms around her husband and she says, "Sweetheart, what are you thinking?" And he says to her with all seriousness, he says, "I cannot figure out how they made that crib for $89.95. Dads aren't always the sensitive ones, are they? Dads aren't always the ones that clue in to things. When a child gets injured, they don't quickly run to dad because they might get walked off as a response. They might not get that emotional connection they're looking for that moms provide. But I think it behooves us as fathers to be very attentive in the way that we run, if that's a safe word, our households. Lead. God expects that. Culturally, that's not how it works. I mean, men are pretty well obsolete. But I say all that to say, even though we may not be the most sensitive, there is something about the way that we are engaged in our homes and our need to be engaged in our homes as we move into this story. Because this story, we're not given a great deal of background. We're given some very basic facts. And a couple of realities. And one of those realities is for us as dads to be attentive to. The other reality is for us as believers to not forget. And so there'll be 2 points to that lesson this morning. So if you have your Bibles, you want to turn here. Oh, I pushed the wrong button. There we go. Oh, I pushed the wrong button again. Do I? Oh, you got it. I'm going to quit pushing buttons for a minute. There we go. Oh, did I do that? I did. It's been a while since we've used the. I think if you can find my PowerPoint again, just put that little arrow. There we go. Maybe you just push the buttons. How about that? Okay. All right. So we're in Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. And notice what it says. And he said, okay, let me back up one more time, and then I'll go back and out. Jesus is speaking to an audience, and in that audience are some scribes and Pharisees who are always looking for a way to trap him, right? They're always looking for something else. They have an agenda whenever they're around Jesus and he's speaking, and their agenda has little to do with them listening to what he's saying. That's the reason he speaks in parables. Okay, so remember that they're in the crowd, these naysayers. And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger? Before we move on, think of this picture. And think of his father. His son has basically come and asked for his inheritance early, if you will. And it gets divided between the 2 sons. So the other son he goes ahead and sorts it out. Now we know in Jewish tradition, the older son would have probably received double portion. So the younger son gets his third. And as would be the case, it burns a hole in his pocket. And off he goes. How could the father let him do that? Why would the father let him do that? Well, partly because part of being a father is you got to watch them, right? You gotta let them test those weeks. You've got to let them go. I don't think he was thrilled. But I also think the father knew the kind of house this young man was raised in. And so he gives him his due, And he does with it what you would expect him to do with it until it's all gone. And then something called life shows up and complicates his deal, and he is not prepared for that. He can't handle that. And so he finds himself in a desperate spot. And Jesus, again, talking to a Jewish audience, wants them to understand just how low it has gotten. And how low has it gotten? He's feeding pigs and unclean animals, according to the Jews. And not only is he feeding pigs, he's wishing he had what they had. So he's lower than a pig. And then it says in verse 17, he came to his senses. He said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, that I am dying here with hunger? And maybe the key for the prodigal is that he came to his senses. But what did he know when he did? He knew how his father ran things. He knew what was there. He knew what he could go back to. Let's go ahead and flip on over to it. Verse 18. This is the prodigal. I will get up and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, but make me as one of your hired men. So he got up and came to his father. And I don't know how far a trip this was or how long he had rehearsed his little speech with regard to what he was going to say, but he was willing to surrender his name. Do I get that? I'm not worthy to be called your son. Has he learned a lesson? Yeah, sometimes the lessons in life, when we launch, there's some tough lessons. Only made tougher when we make poor choices to compound those lessons. So he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, this is what he practiced, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and sandals on his feet, and bring the fattened calf, kill it, let us eat, and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead, and he has come to life again. He was lost, and has been found, and they began to celebrate. Now this story, if I were to stop right there, and I will for just a minute, this is where the other two stories stop, with the celebration of the lost sheep, of the lost coin, of the lost boy. And for fathers, if I can have a short lesson for us, it behooves us to lead our homes in such a way that when our children launch, whether it's in difficult terms like this one, say, I want my share and I'm out of here, or it's with blessing, that we have a place that they can land safely. I think there are a lot of children who struggle in their 20s 30s, because that relationship isn't quite there with their dad. And they don't feel that they can come home. Fathers, let that not be us. I see a dad who had to have a stiff upper lip and send his boy out knowing that he wasn't ready, but knowing he really couldn't stop him either. He's a young adult. Wonder how often he looked down that road. I imagine every day. He looked down that road just to check, just to be sure, just to hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe his boy would go. And he does. And there's much rejoicing. Like I said, that's where the other two stories end. It's like a little tennis match going on. I love it. And I can tell that you can too because you're smiling. And, hey. To both dads, thank you for having your kids here, your families here. Love it. Now this story doesn't end here. This is where the lesson changes from us as fathers always being looking for our kids and wanting our kids. And notice the father doesn't give him an "I told you so," and he deserved one. His father doesn't preach to him a sermon. His father doesn't demote him to a slave. Because he loves his children. And what he wants is to be with them. And we have to be that way as dads. Willing to let them go, but ready for them to come back. And waiting for that. Now the problem is, as Christians, sometimes, and I alluded to this in the lesson with the sheep, sometimes I'm afraid we as Christians forget what it's like to be in that spot. I appreciate the prayers this morning. Everybody's praying for compassion and patience as we walk through a very hostile climate. And may those things prevail. And maybe some sense come to those who lost it. And maybe I don't need to preach to those people. I'll be hoping. Let me get back up a second. Now the next verse, in verse 25, says, it's a lesson to the elder brother. Now his older son, okay, do you remember how that started? He divided up, they all got what was due, right? Now the older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing, and he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back and safe and sound." And I would almost anticipate that the servant is caught up in the excitement. "Your brother's home." Verse 28. But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out. Father's got his hands full, doesn't he? Because the Father wants the family together. Do we get that? The Father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his Father, look, for so many years, I have served you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. And yet you have never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. I don't know if you can tell, but he's about to break his arm, patting himself on the back. Look at how great I am. I should have a shirt that says, World's Best Son. When this son of yours, Cain, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. Have we ever felt that way? Life has slapped somebody upside the head and they have come to their sins and they want a relationship with God, and for some reason we need them to jump for a few more hoops for us. Because we know what kind of life they've lived, and that's not fair. You see what happened? The older son is worried about what's fair. He got to do all this stuff. I could have been like that. I don't know if he's jealous all of a sudden. We're not told. But he's very angry. This wasteful son, and you're treating him like he's a hero. You say, I don't know if we've ever felt that way. But I feel that maybe a time or two we've lost sight of the big picture. And he said to him, Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice for this brother of yours. Notice how the Father changes the connection. The older brother says, this son of yours, and the Father reminds them their family, this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has now been found. Can we so quickly erase those wrongs, whether committed against us or against God, when someone decides to follow Jesus and surrenders to Jesus? When they come up out of the waters of baptism and are this new creation, am I going to be holding a grudge against their past? Or am I going to remember what the Father has said for family? You see, this last little part of this story is to remind us as believers of the excitement of being found. And that excitement should not be belittled to anybody, but should be celebrated in anybody who's found. And I think Jesus is looking through the crowd, and as he gets to the older brother, he's talking to the Pharisees. They've had God this whole time, and now they're mad. They're really don't want to share God with others. They just want to be patted on the back for the work that they've done. Brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you today as we strive to be godly, whether it's a father, a mother, all of us as believers. We can't be godly unless God is our Father. And Jesus pulls back the curtain to let us see what God looks like as a father longing for his children to return, loving them even though they have felt so miserably. May we never forget what it was like to be lost. And I've never been hungry enough to eat what I want to eat, what a pig eats. But may there always be a fat calf for the one who decides to leave that life. To be with God, to be with his family. I want to encourage you today, dads, we love you. We're thankful for you. It's not easy in the climate that we live in. But you need to know we're praying for you as fathers, as you raise your young children, as you provide for your families, as you protect your families. Make sure they know they have a place that they can come back. No matter how high they fly or how hard they fall, they have a place. Make that kind of home for them. And all of us as believers, let us not forget, and let us not get upset because someone decides to return to the Lord. Let us be thankful and rejoicing. Let us be patient and kind. But maybe most of all, let us be forgiving. Not like this brother. We can encourage you in your walk today. We want to encourage you. If we can help you in your relationship with our Lord, we want to help you with that. Maybe you're the dad in this story. You're longing for some child to come home. Don't lose hope. Trust God. And keep moving forward. Maybe you're the child and it's time to come home. Don't hesitate. We can help you. We're here. But understand, we are family, and we are in this together until the Lord calls us home, or he returns. And may that be soon. However we can help, please come down and stand.